Reagan Escude, who is a Turning Point USA ambassador, also a Christian, she made a video, and she was talking about why BLM is not a Christian movement. This is not the way Christ would want us to do things. Well, my gosh, somebody in her office saw how offensive that was, and within 15 minutes, she lost her job. We have Reagan on the phone with us. Hello, Reagan. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good. So, Reagan, were you named after Ronald Reagan?
You know, it's funny. My nickname growing up was Reaganomics. My mom called me that, and I still answer to it to this day. I don't know if that's what she named me after, but my nickname definitely is attributed to him.
Okay. So, Reagan, what did you say that was so horrible? And Sarah, please be ready on the edit button. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I was really... Mr. Beck, I was addressing the evangelical church, seeing the way Christian pastors and leaders have been just twisting the true gospel of the Bible and making this social gospel narrative was really upsetting and sad to me, because I feel like it's very misleading to believers. And so I posted a video discussing the Black Lives Matter organization, what it stands for, and why Christians should be focusing on the gospel, which ultimately reconciles hearts and fixes the sin problem of racism, rather than calling for action and you know, focusing on racial reconciliation and things that are not of Christ.
Well, there's no reconciliation with BLM and this movement. There is no racial recognition. There is beg for forgiveness, but you can't really even know what you're sorry for because you don't know what you're guilty for because you're white. And you have to go through them for forgiveness. And there is no forgiveness, as I just pointed out. The problem with that is the only one that can truly grant forgiveness is God. You're coming in because you're white with original sin. Well, that goes against, we don't hold people responsible for what their fathers or their great-grandfathers did at any time. God doesn't hold people responsible. He holds you as an individual and never a collective. This social justice garbage that is being shoveled by many of our churches is just that, garbage and an affront to God. When man declares there's an original sin that you have to pay for because of what somebody else did 150 years ago, and there is no real forgiveness for you because you're white or black or yellow or orange, it doesn't matter, that's an affront to God. And I don't know why churches aren't getting this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think too, Mr. Beck, there has been a Trojan horse of social justice within the church for a very long time. And I think, you know, after the George Floyd incident, things have come to their peak. And so the church is kind of in a place where if they don't address this, it would be an injustice to congregants, it would appear. But it's a shame, really, that the church has drifted so far from teaching theology that they have to, you know, as Scripture says, tickle the ears of those willing to listen. And they have to call for worldly virtuousness over spiritual righteousness. And it's just a dangerous line to walk. I think you have a congregation of people who come to church on Sunday to hear the gospel and walk away in worship, but many church leaders are sharing a motivational speech with scripture sprinkled in so that congregants walk away with a worldly call to action, which ultimately does not save.
So the reaction when you posted this, you didn't think you'd get any blowback, or did you?
I don't think I expected to get as much as I got. Most of my following on social media is Christian conservatives who very much, you know, hold the same beliefs I do. So I really was speaking to them. I did not expect it. And, you know, obviously social media reaches everyone, but I didn't expect it to blow up the way that it did. And so, I mean, I got backlash, excuse me, I got backlash probably for a solid 24 to 48 hours. And it was a lot, but I think it's something people needed to hear. So I haven't taken it down. And
you lost your job because somebody in your office saw this post and said, you are a racist and need to be terminated. And within 15 minutes, I'm told, you were in the office of the boss, and they were talking about you and your job. True?
Well, so it was actually an ex-employee, so someone that I actually used to work with, and she made a post and called me racist, homophobic, and she tagged my employer. So, of course, then, the mob on social media knows where I work now. And so they made calls in to the company, made death threats to the owners, and I don't really know how bad it was. I know they had to get law enforcement involved to patrol the area and protect the building. And it just blows my mind that that's the way we're going.
So when you were brought in and you heard this, I know you didn't want anything to happen to anybody else. Were they angry with you, or what was their reaction? Was it like, we got to get the mob off our back?
Well, I think they were. So they first called me because I've been working at home due to all the COVID regulations, and so they called me and said, it's been brought to our attention about this social media post. We're going to put you on paid suspension until we complete an investigation. And so I kind of was just all day, heart rate kind of going high and not really sure what to expect. And then by 5 p.m. that day, they called me back and said, due to the measures we've had to take, we've come to the conclusion we have to terminate your employment. And I think it was something that they didn't want to do. And I could kind of hear that in their voice, but it was one of those things where they felt like their hands were tied.
They said you resigned.
Yes, they did. And that's a whole other thing. On the phone, they offered me the option to resign, and I said, I appreciate that option. And I guess that they took that as a commitment. And actually, an hour later, I called back and said, I've made my decision. I'd prefer to be terminated. But my separation notice does not say that. So,
Right. So would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely. I've kind of, the way things have gone down, I feel like, and I don't have hard feelings towards the company I worked for at all. I mean, they have always been wonderful in taking care of me, but I do feel like this could have gone a completely different way. I feel like they could have fired me and done what they did, or they could have protected me and, pressed charges on those making threats, because those really were the people in the wrong. And so, looking back, it's like, I wouldn't change anything I did. I said what I said. I still stand by what I said to this day. And if an employer, is willing to let me go because of something I posted, not on company time, not related to the company, I don't. It just kind of has solidified for me the fact that it's not worth my time.
Reagan, you are, I think, the first person I've talked to that has actually lived the scripture of he who will lose his life for my sake will gain his life. You're the first person that I think I've talked to, Stu, correct me if I'm wrong, that has actually fit that scripture, and you've had the bravery enough, been brave enough to stand up against the mob and say, I'm sorry, but the Lord would say this. And that is a big deal. There's a lot of cowards out there, many of us. And I have been pushed to the wall, but I have not been pushed to the wall like even you have. I don't think. Nobody's threatened to, well, no. I take that back. Anyway, but you really fit that scripture, and congratulations. Keep it up.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, the whole time all this was going on, I just kept thinking of John 15, where Jesus said, if the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we're expected to have persecution. We're guaranteed persecution, as a matter of fact. So, the worldly reaction isn't really a surprise to me. I think what was a surprise to me were the number of people that I knew and grew up with who said they were Christians and who have, studied Scripture, and I've been to church with them, and they have fallen for this social justice gospel. Yeah.
Reagan, thank you very much. Reagan Escude, I will tell you the same thing that I said in 2009. If you're going to a church and they're talking about social justice, you need to do one of two things: either run for your life, or make your first stop your pastor's office or your priest's office and say, "What do you mean by social justice?" There is no such thing as collective salvation. There is no such thing as the redemptive power of the whole. There is no such thing. I mean, it's amazing to me the people who argue faith versus works over and over and over and over and over and over again will actually be the same people who are fighting for social justice. That's an affront to God. When someone says there is no forgiveness for this sin which you didn't commit, you're asking to bow down to an altar of a false god. And I stand by what I said 11 years ago on social justice. It is something that has been misconstrued. It started out as a good thing, I think, started out as a good thing. Some people still are convinced that it means just help the poor, etc. It does not mean that anymore. And you need to know it and study it and get away from it. When I say study it, you better hurry, because all of our history, our dictionaries, everything are being changed as we speak. You need to keep a diary on what is true and what you know, and do not go over the cliff with the rest of humanity.